Hey, what's up? Welcome back to my channel where we create apps using Flutter from scratch. In this one, I'm going to teach you how to create a messenger chat app, and it's actually really fun. So let me show you by jumping into the code. So I've opened up a brand new Flutter project and you should just get this demo homepage. Now I'm going to delete everything below the main function so that we can start this from scratch. So in my app, let's have the material app. And we're going to start off by creating a login page. So this will just be a blank scaffold. Now if you come back to the main.dart file, you can now click on this to import it. So you should just get a white blank app, and this is where we'll start. So in the login page for the body, I'm going to have a big column. And let's have a bit of a plan here. So I'm going to have a logo at the top. Let's have a kind of welcome back message. And we're going to need two text fields. So one for the email, one for the password. And then we need our sign in button. And then finally, if the user is not already a member, then we want to register now. Cool, so let's go to the beginning and start filling this out. Now you can place any logo for your business or app, but I'm just going to use an icon here. And let's just use the default message icon. Now you can see it's there in the corner. So I'm going to center everything. And you can see it's covered by that notch area. So one useful widget to use here is to wrap everything in a safe area. So this will just avoid that notch bit. Awesome. Now let's have a little text widget just saying, welcome back, you've been missed. And let's style it up. So maybe I can make this just slightly bigger. So font size, let's say 16. Now when it comes to the text field, we're going to use this a few times throughout the app. So I'm going to create a new folder called components. And in here, I'm going to create my own text field. So what we need in a text field is first of all the controller. And then the hint text. And then the obscure text, which is going to be a boolean. So let's require all these. And I'll explain what each of these three things will do. So if you just type text field, then the first thing is we have to give it the controller so that we can access what's inside. And the obscure text, let's just give it the boolean obscure text. This will be for if we want to hide the characters. So if it's for like the password or something. And then in the decoration, let's just have a simple input decoration for now. So I'm going to have some borders here. If I come back to my login page, let's just see what this looks like. So if you start typing my text field, you can see there it says auto import. And we have to give it those three things. So let's just create that real quick. So the first thing is our text controller, which we're going to need two of them, one for the email and one for the password. So let's just give the email one for this first guy. And the hint text, we want to say email, and we don't want to obscure this. So if you save this and run it again, then there's our text field, and you can see we can start typing in here. Awesome. Now I like to make my apps look pretty. So I'm going to just decorate this up a little bit more. So if you look at this focus border, I'm just going to have the same outline border, but maybe make it white. And let's fill in some colors in here. So let's see what this looks like if I save it. Okay, looking good. Now in this overall scaffold, let's make the background color a gray with a strength of 300. And also I'm just going to wrap the entire column with some padding. And I just want it on the horizontal. Now I think the fill color, we could make it lighter actually. Yeah, that's looking a little bit better. Awesome. Now let's just copy this and do another one for the password. Now for this, I want to obscure the text. So what that does, like I mentioned before, you can see for the password field, we can't see what we're typing in. So that's what the obscure text is doing. Now at this point, I think we should have a think about how we want to space this out. So one thing I like to use is just some sized boxes. So this will just be empty space. Sweet, that's looking pretty good. So now it's time for our button. So I also want to create another component here called my button so that we can reuse this later on. Now when it comes to the button, I want to have a gesture detector so that we can tap on it. And if you hover over this on tap, you can see this is the method that it needs. So I'm going to just require that at the top. And for the physical appearance, I'm just going to say maybe make it black. And let's just put some text in the middle, which I should also ask for at the beginning. And so let's just save this and see what this looks like. So if you start typing my button, you can see there it is, auto import. So just hit enter. And if I tap this button, what do we want to happen? Well, for now, let's just execute nothing. And for the text, let's give it sign in. Okay, so there it is. Now it looks like we can't even see the text because we should make this white and maybe even bold as well. Cool. And I think this could use some padding. Nice. And you guys all know I hate sharp corners, so let's make this border radius much more curved. And looking at this, I think the text for the button could be just a little bigger. Sweet, this is looking pretty good. Now, one thing is in the text field, I think the hint text is a bit not visible. So let's change the color to gray. Yep, that's a bit more better. It's just grayed out. Awesome. Now let's just continue this on. So let's just have some more space. And the last thing we need is just some text here saying not a member. So if the user is not a member, we want to have an option to register. So let's just have a text widget saying register now. Now, just to show that the user, this register now is clickable, this particular text widget, I want to make it bolder. Awesome. So now that we have all the UI elements on the screen, if you come to this overall column and you just main axis alignment to the center, that should make it look pretty nice. Maybe the logo here could be a little bigger. Sweet, so this is our login page. Now we also need to create a register page, which is going to be very similar to our login page. So I'm just going to copy what we have here in the UI, and let's just copy it in the build method here. So import what we need to import. Now the main difference for the register page is I want one more text field. Now just to reflect the changes as we code this up, if you come back to the main.dart file, let's actually just return the register page. And so we're going to have to change this up just a little bit. So for example, the welcome back message, we probably want to say something like, let's create an account for you. And when it comes to the text fields, we just need one more text field to have a confirm password, which means we're going to need to create one more controller called confirm password controller. And then the button, so we don't want to sign in, we want to sign up. And just at the end here, we want to say already a member, then you can log in now. Awesome, so if you click on this sign up button, we want to have a method here called sign up, and we're going to fill this out a bit later on. So let's do the same thing. If I come back to the login page, I want to sign in. If I click this button, now, what I want to do right now is I want to be able to toggle between the login and the register page when I click on this text at the bottom. So if you come to the top of this code, let's create an on tap, and just the register now text widget, let's wrap it in a gesture detector. And let's do something similar for the register page. So I want to wrap this login now text widget with a gesture detector so that I can make this tappable. Great, so now what we want to do is if you come back to our main.dart file, we're either showing the register page or the login page, right? So just to know which page we should be showing, I'm going to create another thing here called login or register. And for this one, I want to put this in a folder called services. And in this folder, we're going to have one for authentication. So I'm just going to call it auth. And let's create this file right now. So all this is going to do is we're just going to initially show the login page. And then the main thing here is we need a method just to toggle between the two pages. Okay, so if I hit this method, then we're just going to show the other page. And if you come to the build method, just depending on this boolean, so are we showing the login page? If we are, then just show the login page. And you can see there it requires the on tap that we created earlier. So if I tap on that text widget, then we want to toggle pages. Okay, and then else, let's return the register page. Awesome. So if I come back to my main.dart, let's just import this guy and let's run this. Awesome. So you can see here, we've got the login page, and then if I click on that register now at the bottom, it will go to the other pages. And so we can just toggle between the two. Sweet. Awesome. Now let's hook it up to Firebase. So if you go to your console, let's add a new project. And I'm just going to disable Google Analytics for now. And let's create this. Sweet. So we want to authenticate the users. So let's click on this authentication and let's get started. Cool. So I want to enable the email and password. And also let's add a test user. So I'm just going to call it test@gmail.com and just give it a password. Sweet. So if I come back to my code, we're going to need to hook this up to Firebase. So I'll go through the process right now, but if you need some more information and help on how to authenticate using Firebase, you should check out my authentication tutorials. So I'll link that below. Make sure to check that out if you haven't set it up already. So in the terminal, if you type Firebase login, make sure that you're logged into the same Gmail. And then now we can say .pub global, and we're going to activate the Flutter CLI. And by the way, if you're on Mac, looks like we get this error. So if you just copy this, then you can just paste it in. And let's hit Flutterfire configure. So hopefully you should be able to see your Firebase projects. And so there's the one that we created just then. And we can select which platform we want to do. So I'm just going to do Android and iOS. Cool, and I'm just going to hit yes to continue, and everything should be good. So what we just did is if you come back to your Firebase console and you go to your project overview, and if I just refresh this page, hopefully you got these two apps here that are connected, so the Android and the iOS. Sweet, so now we can say Flutter pub add Firebase core. And actually what we want now is the authentication, so Firebase auth. If you didn't know, what we just did is if you go to your pubspec.yaml, this is where we handle all of the dependencies. So you can see those two we just added from the terminal. So in this auth folder, I'm going to create a new file here called authgate.dart. And essentially with this, I just want to make sure to check if we are logged in or not. In the body of the scaffold, we're going to have a stream builder, and we're going to listen for this stream, Firebase auth, and we're going to listen for any auth state changes. And then in the builder, we can say, now depending on if the user is logged in and if the user is not logged in. Okay, so for the user being logged in, if the snapshot has data, then let's return the home page, which we'll create in just a second. But else, if the user is not logged in, then we're going to return that login or register page. So let's create a new file called homepage. And just real quick, I'm just going to put something in the app bar, just saying homepage. Okay, so if I come back to this, we can now import it. So if you come back to my main.dart file, instead of returning this, we can now return the auth gate. And in the main function, we always have to set this up. So widgets flutter binding ensure initialized. And we're going to await for this Firebase. Okay, we're going to initialize the app. So we always have to do this when working with Firebase. Awesome, so now let's fill out our authentication. So in the auth folder, let's create a new file called authservice.dart. And so we're going to create a class here to handle all of the different methods. Okay, so at the beginning, we always just need an instance of this auth to know if we're logged in or not. And then we're going to need a sign in method and a sign out method just for now. So I'm just going to call this sign in with email and password. And all I want to know is the email and the password. So we're going to put this in a try catch statement. So we're going to try the sign in first. Okay, and you can see if you go to your Firebase auth, you can see that sign in with email and password method. And so we can give it the appropriate fields. Whoops, this should be async. And so we can get the user credential like this. And then if there's any error, we can catch this exception. And so this e.code, so that's the error code. And we're going to throw that if there's any errors. So once we sign in, we should also return the user credential. Okay, so let's see if this works. If you go to your login page, if I click on this sign in button, then it's going to trigger this sign in method, which is currently blank. So just before I fill this out, I'm going to need just a little bit of state management. And so I'm just going to use a really popular and simple state management solution, which is Provider. And I've used this in many of my other videos as well. So if you have any problems, just let me know. And so once you got that, we can come back to our auth service and we just want to extend this to the change notifier. So if you come back to our sign in method, let's first of all get the auth service. Let's import that provider. And this way we can access all of the methods. So we're going to do another little quick try and catch. And so this auth service, if you hit dot, you can see there's our method that we created. So we're going to give it the email and password, which should be in our controllers, right? So we're going to just get the text of whatever's in those controllers. And if there's any error, we're going to display it with a snack bar. And that's just going to be something that shows up on the bottom. Sweet, and the last thing we need to do is, if I just come back to my main file here, the my app, we have to wrap this in a change notifier provider. So if you have any questions about this state management, just let me know. But essentially we can access these methods within the widget tree at any point. Sweet, which naturally means we should have some sort of button here to log out, right? So let's just create that method real quick in the auth service. And this one is really easy. Just go to your instance for the Firebase auth and you can see how you can sign out. Easy. So let's come back to our home page. And if you look in the app bar, you can see this actions. And so here we can put our sign out button. So let's use a icon button. And on the press, we want to sign out, which we'll create in just a second. And for the icon, let's use the log out icon. Cool, so let's have this method at the top. So we're going to get the auth service. And you can see here sign out. Sweet, so let's save everything and just run it again. And while we're in the auth service, let's also create a method to create a new user. So that's for this register page, right? So creating a new user is also pretty simple. We similarly just need an email and a password to create a user. And again, we're going to just use a try catch statement. And the only difference here is if you go to your Firebase auth instance, you can see there's a method here called create user with email and password. Okay, and if there's any error, just return that error. Awesome, so if I go to my register page, you can see this button is going to trigger this sign up method. And so in here, we can now do a quick check And I'm just going to make sure that the password is the same as the confirm password. Okay, so if they're not the same, then let's just show a little snack bar at the bottom just saying passwords don't match, just to let the user know. Cool, but if the password and the confirm password is all good, then we can get the auth service. And then we can try to sign up. And just display any error in the snack bar if we need. Okay, so if you save everything and just run this app again, let's make sure it all works. So I'm going to say mitch@gmail.com and just put in some password. And if I sign up, then it takes us straight to the home page. Nice. And you can see there's our logout button at the top right. So if I click this, then we should just sign back out. Looking good. Now if I come back to my console, if you go to your authentication, you can see that there's our users that we created. So now it's time for the chatting ability. So we're going to need a Cloud Firestore. So if you click this, we can create a new database. Let's hit next and just choose your location. I'm just going to leave it at US. Sweet. Now the first thing is if you go to your rules, I'm just going to change this to true so that we can write some new information. And then in the data here, this is where we're going to store all the chatting information. Awesome. Now let's come back to the terminal and we're going to add the dependency for the Cloud Firestore. So just make sure that that's in there. Now we've created a new user. So under this, when we create a new user, let's also create a document for the user in the users collection. Okay, so if you come back to the top, we've got the instance of the auth. So let's have another instance for the Firestore. So now we can go to the Firestore's collection. Let's call this collection users. And under users, we can have a few documents. Okay, so for the documents, we're going to put the user's ID and let's set a couple of fields. So let's store the user ID and also their email. So we're doing this when we create a new user. Now it's probably a good idea to put this same bit of code for when we sign a user in, just to make sure that we add it if it doesn't already exist. You know, sometimes we might manually create a user like we did earlier in the backend. So let's just make sure to merge this if it doesn't already exist. Sweet. So if I say, okay, let's sign into the Mitch@gmail. And if I come back to my console and I refresh the Firestore, hopefully we have a collection here called users. There it is. And you can see that's the UID. And now we've stored the two fields here. So far so good. Now, if I come back to my home page, right, what do I want to display? I want to display, let's try to display all of the users in our app. So if I grab the instance of this auth in the scaffold, so under this app bar, let's create in the body, we're going to create this user list. Now I'm going to separate this out into another widget just to make the code a bit more clean and readable. So we're going to build a list of users except for the current logged in user. Okay, so we just want to display everyone else so that we can chat to them. So we're going to return a stream builder. And the stream that we're going to listen for is the Firestore and specifically the collection of users. Then we can build and just do a couple checks here. So the usual, like if we have an error, let's just say error. If it's loading, we also just want to return loading. And then finally, we can return a list view. So we have to give it to children. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to get all of the documents in our Firestore and we're going to build a user list item. And so again, I'm just going to separate this out into an individual widget just to make the code a bit cleaner. And so when I build a user list item, I'm going to need a document snapshot, which I actually don't need the parameter for the first method. I just need it for this guy. And we're going to make sure the data is in a map format. So that's kind of the field that you saw earlier in Firestore. So we want to display all of the users except for the current user. So let's just do a quick check here. In the auth, if the current user email is not the email in the list, then we're just going to return the user as a simple list view. So let's just see what this looks like. Now, it's got an onTap method, which we'll figure out in just a second. So when we tap on this, we want to go to that particular chat page. So if I click on someone's name, I want to start talking to them. And let's create the chat page right now. So just to make sure that this works, let's get the chat page and accept a string for the user email. And let's also get the receiver user's ID. So when we send a message, we're going to know who it's going to. Sweet. So in the app bar for the title, let's just put the receiver's email. Now, if I come back to my home page, you can see the red squiggle. So let's import this. And we have to fill out these couple parameters. So the email, just give it the email, and the ID, let's give it the ID. Cool, and otherwise just return a blank container. So let's give this a go. So I'm going to create a new account here, just let's say like candy. And it looks like we have an error here. String is not a type of, we should wrap this in a text widget. There we go. Sweet, and we can actually see if I click on this particular user, we can go to the chat page. Awesome, so again, just to do another quick test, let's create another account, and this time I'm going to call it Bobby. And we can see all the other users that are signed in except for Bobby. Great, and then we can start talking to them. Great, so now it's time to have the chatting services. So in our service folder, we've been doing auth this whole time. Let's create another folder called chat, and we're going to create chat service as a class. So let's start by getting the instance of the auth and the Firestore. And the main methods we want here is we want to send a message, and we also want to get the messages from the backend. So let's just start off with the sending message. I just want to know who are we sending it to, right? So the receiver, and also what's the message. And again, just to have a bit of a plan here, we have to firstly get the current user's information. So we know who's sending the information, and we have to create a new message. And this is the main bit here, which is we have to construct a chat room ID for the current user and also the receiver ID. And then finally add the new message to the database. So each pairing of two different people are going to be their own chat room ID. So I'll explain that in more detail in just a second. Now come back to the library, and we're going to create a new folder called model, because we have to create a class for the message. So when we create a message, what do we need to know? I need to know the sender. So let's grab the sender ID and also the email. And let's get the receiver's ID. And what is the actual message? And let's also get the timestamp. Cool. And then one last thing is we need to have just a quick method here just to convert it to a map, because that's how the information is stored in Firebase. Awesome. So now we can come back to our chat service, and just getting the current user is simple. And let's get the user email as well. and also the timestamp so that we can kind of show the messages in order, right? Chronological order. And now we can create a new message. So make sure to import this, which is what we created just then. And let's create a new message. So when we create a new message, we have to fill out these parameters. Now the sender ID, let's give it this current ID and the current email, and everything's good. Now for the main brain of this, so construct a chatting room ID. So what we're going to do is let's get the ID of the two people, right, as a list, and we're going to sort them. And so the sorting part is important because we just want to make sure that the chat room ID is going to be the same for any two people, right? Like John Mary is the same as Mary John. So we just want to sort them, make it its own chat ID. And let's just join it with like a little underscore between them. And then finally, we can add this to the database. So if you go to the Firestores collection, let's create a new collection called chat rooms. And inside the chat room, we're going to have in the document, the individual unique chat room ID. And in a chat room, we're going to have another collection called messages. And that's where we're going to add this new message. So we'll see this in action in just a second when we test it. But just to finish off, let's also have a method to get the messages from the database. Okay, so once we know the user ID and the other person's user ID, then let's try to get that chat room ID. So we're going to do something similar. We're going to sort them. And join them with a underscore. And we're going to look this up. And for the timestamp, let's say it's descending is going to be false. So it's going to be in chronological order, as you'll see in just a second. These are the two main methods, so sending a message and also getting the message. Yay, now let's come to the chat page and let's start displaying all this here. So one thing about a chat page is we're going to need a message controller, right? We're going to have an input for the user. Let's also create an instance of my chat service that we just created, and also get an instance of the auth. Sweet, so let's just create a little method here called send message, and we just want to check that we're only sending a message if it's not empty. Okay, so if that's all good, if there is a message to send, then we can go to the chat service and there's our method, send message, and just give it the appropriate information. And once we've sent it, we just want to make sure we want to clear the controller after sending the message. Great. Now it's time for the UI. So let's go to the body. We're going to create a big column. And at the top, I just want to have the messages to fill up most of the space. So I'm going to expand this. And then at the bottom, we're going to have just a little text field. So for the input. So like I said, I'm just going to separate out these widgets just to make our code a bit more clean and readable. So we're going to have three things here. So building a message list, building a message item, and then building the message input. So let's just start with the input. So this is going to be a row because I want to have the text field for most of the space. So again, I'm going to expand it. And then we can give it the controller. For the hint text, let's just say like enter message. And of course, we don't want to obscure this. And right next to the text field, let's create an icon button for the user to tap on it just so that we can send a message. So maybe like an up arrow would be appropriate here. So that's the input part done. Now let's go to the building the actual message list. So I'm going to start with the item. And for the parameter, I'm going to need to know the document snapshot. So let's create the map for this. And as you guys know, when you look at a chat app, right, when you look at some kind of messaging app, we want to have the other person's messages on the left, and our messages, we want to align them to the right. So that's why we should have the alignment depending on if it's the sender or if it's the receiver. Right, so one's going to be on the right, one's going to be on the left. Now I can return a big container and just give it the alignment. And let's just have a little column here because I want to say the sender's email on the top and the message underneath. Sweet, looking good. So finally we can put this all together in a list. So we're going to create a stream builder here, and the stream we're going to listen for is the chat service getting message. So let's try to retrieve all of the messages from our Firestore. And in the builder, let's do the usual error checks. And also if it's loading. And then finally, we can return the list view. And we can put the data in the children. And so for each document, so basically for each message, we can build a message item now. And why is this red? Oh, this should be children. Sweet, I think that's looking pretty good so far. So let's save it and let's run it again. And you can see, yeah, there's the text field at the bottom. Now, I think we should add some padding, but let's just test this out first. Let's say hello. And if you send it, it goes on and you can see it works. Sweet, so the functionality works. And just to test this out again, I'm going to sign out and let's sign in as Mitch. Right, and we click on that same chat room and you can see depending on if you're the sender or the receiver. So again, depending on the current logged in user's perspective, it will be aligned appropriately. So that's what this alignment is doing. Now, I think we can even make this better. We can make it even prettier. And if I just send another message just to show you guys more clearly what's going on, you can see like if I comment out this alignment, then everything is just automatically going to be in the middle, right? So that's why this alignment is useful for us. Another thing is in each message item for the cross-axis alignment, I want to make it at the end as well as the start. So yep, that looks much cleaner. And yay, so now that the functionality is pretty much done, let's try to make this a little bit prettier. So in the components, I'm going to create a chat bubble. And in a chat bubble, all we need to know is just the message as a string. And let's create a container here. So want some padding. And I know I'm going to need some decoration. And specifically, I want the border radius to be curved. And let's make it blue. Sweet, and we can just give the text. So if you save that and you come back to the chat page, if you go to where we're displaying the message, which is this text widget, let's replace this with chat bubble and just give it the message to this parameter. And you can see that's the little chat bubble we just created. Now, when it comes to the decoration, that's just going to be completely up to you and your preference on how you want this to look. But I can see the first thing that we should do is probably make this text widget white. And I think we could add some space between the message and the user's name. Now, oh yeah, we should add some padding to the bottom, like this text field. Let's just add some sized box first on the bottom. And let's add some symmetrical padding. Great, and that's it. That's how you build a simple chat app. If you made it this far into the tutorial, leave me a purple heart in the comments just so I know. You did a really great job. I want to continue building functional apps like this, so if you have any recommendations on what you want me to build, let me know below. I hope you learned something. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.